everybody. It's Heather with the Leadership at Heart podcast. And today I am so tickled to have Maureen Leahy on here. She is somebody that I met. So it was kind of an interesting thing. I was actually called to speak at Sharon S. Richardson Community Hospice and palliative care. And I had gone to the event, but before I went, I found out that she, who's the chief clinical officer of this organization, had started a book club with her, I think it was a clinical team, and it was on the art of carrying leadership. So I was like, ooh, no, I'm super intrigued. I want to know more about her. And then I met her and I was like, oh my gosh, I have got to get you on the show. So that's why you're here, Maureen. Welcome.
It's my pleasure to be here with you.
When you meet her, I can't wait for all to just listen to her. And it's her voice is so calming. But so, Maureen, tell everybody, where you are in your leadership journey, and kind of how you arrived at the hospice that you're at now.
So I have been a nurse for almost 40 years now, and I went to Niagara University in Niagara Falls, New York, and figured out early on that I really had a teacher kind of in me. My father was a school principal, and my sister's a teacher, my brother's a teacher, and kind of had that DNA in me. I thought that I was going to take care of cardiac patients and do a lot of cardiac teaching and education. I found myself drawn to the cancer patients. My first job as a graduate nurse was at Ingham County Medical Center in Michigan, where my husband at the time was going to law school. And I had a little tiny evening role, and just felt drawn to these patients that were having chemotherapy and many of them dying or really seriously ill. And it was just an attraction. And then from there, it just grew into more of attention to not only the experience of cancer care and serious illness, but it was being drawn to those patients that were suffering. I recognized early on that bodies don't suffer, but people suffer. And so the human condition in the setting of serious illness, and certainly now in the setting of dying, has really shaped my life and shaped my career into what it is today. So I had a stint in oncology early on, and then found myself in hospice work, and doing education, training, teaching, directing programs and inpatient hospice care. I was a director of a care navigation model in a very large hospice in Florida. I had a stint in New York City where I was the associate director of nursing at Mount Sinai Hospital in the Palliative Care Institute, where I was completely privileged to be a part of champions in our work, teaching in the fellowship, training young doctors and nurses how to do this work. So it's been a career that has been just peppered with so many incredible experiences and opportunities to grow and learn myself. So yeah, it's
Wow.
been pretty,
It's
pretty
just
incredible.
crazy. Well, it's thinking about like anybody, so people, this idea of being drawn to this, to the suffering, drawn to the pain, drawn to the, in this case, dying. Like this really turns a lot of who we are, most of us, like on our heads, because it really is so outwardly focused. It really is. And the joy that I even hear as I saw when I met you and as I hear in your voice as you
Yeah.
talk about it, and it's perplexing.
Yeah, Heather, I'm not much fun at a cocktail party. When people find out what you do for a living, they either start to cry or run away. Um, and so I think it's odd, and yet as sentimental as it sounds, I wanted to help people. And so I don't think any of us really get out of this alive. Well, I know for a fact that none of us do. And so over the years, however, in my own personal experiences with grief and loss and serious illness myself, I think it took on a new dimension for me as I began to, those things in my life that informed my work and informed how I manage people, how I take care of our staff, or I think that's the journey of it. I think not necessarily I've evolved, right? And so if you allow yourself to do that, even in the face of your own grief or experiences with loss or death or sickness or loneliness, all of those things, right? It shapes who we are, and you come out the other end of that with for me, coming out the other end of those things has been, how can I take my experiences and help the next person? It's a little bit altruistic, but I think I've come by that the hard way. You know, your character's developed, I think, by those things that are hard for you to go through.
Oh, it's so, so true. So, okay, let's go a little deeper into that, like, more into the background. Take us through maybe what you see as the kind of the major, I guess, pain points, milestones, turning points that kind of lead you to who you are today, doing this work and this hospice work, which for most of us, it wouldn't be something we would seek out, but for you, given this background. So just just open the window a little bit into what that journey was.
Sure. I think early on, having an expectation of what your life is going to look like and what your work is going to look like, and what your contribution is. Learning from certainly my own father's death at a young age. I was a young mother at the time, and trying to. My dad was a school principal, and he died 6 months after his diagnosis of squamous cell lung cancer. It was the first real experience that I had with death. Or the death of someone that I had to go through. No one could assuage my feelings. It was my dad. I had to go through it. Nobody could make me feel better, as you know. So that experience kind of, it shaped my career. Certainly I think I learned what kind of nurse I didn't want to be after his experience in healthcare. I had been a nurse maybe couple of years when he got sick. And so that was a very pivotal point, I think, in my career that shifted me really to, I couldn't change the fact that my dad was dying, but what I could change was the sort of care that he got. And that's kind of been at the hallmark of a lot of what I do and what's important to me. Helping people, as sentimental as that sounds, I think it really has been the driver for my work. Going forward. I turned 64 last summer, and I have been doing this work for a very long time. Went through a painful divorce. That was certainly a loss, and trying to refigure my life and my family's life. I was diagnosed with triple negative breast cancer. And again, I call it my view from the mattress. Had a year of chemotherapy and a lot of serious treatment. Was very sick, and learning how to be sick, learning how to be a care receiver, having not necessarily experienced that before, was a really hard thing to do. And again, a shaping of my life. I was so fortunate to be in a tribe of people who were like-minded and knew how to help me much more than anyone else, I think. You know, my hospice pals and my people who just understood. I had an incredible leader, nursing leader at that time during my illness, that really was influential in me and how to take care of somebody who was sick. I was single, wondering about love, wondering about future and mortality, having to work, having to keep my insurance to pay for my chemotherapy treatments. And I had this incredible nursing leader in my life at the time that was the most tender, understanding, compassionate person. And she's been someone that I have tried to emulate and role model to others as a direct result of that very difficult experience in my own life. She was extraordinary. I think grief and loss and death, it happens in a lot of different ways to people. When I was recovering from my illness, I took a trip to Haiti. I was on my way to Haiti before I got sick. I canceled the trip when I got sick, but was able to go back after I was recovering. I was going to Haiti to, I thought, take care of 40 little orphans dying of AIDS. And there was a stirring in my life. I realized later that it was cancer, my own cancer. But I had read Paul Farmer's book, Beyond the Mountains, and it was his work in Haiti in changing the face of drug-resistant tuberculosis, and being an extraordinary physician in that space, was really kind of a segue into the next season of my life that was really cancer care and cancer treatment. When I went back to Haiti, I had been recovering from my illness, and so it took on a whole new dimension for me in taking care of those children that were there. Paul Farmer's book, Beyond the Mountains, talks about there's another mountain coming. Like there's a beyond the mountains, there's another mountain. And it was true in the landscape of Haiti, but also true in my own life. I fell in love with a man who I dated in college and in my recovery. And we moved to New York City together. And we were there about 9 months. He was jogging around Central Park and had a fatal dysrhythmia and died. And so I was sort of catapulted into more grief. 3 years after that, my daughter died. And so I was again in this space of trying to negotiate through grief and loss and in the world of hospice, right? So I was in it and sort of figure my way out of it. Here I am today, much more resilient, I think. Not necessarily anything on my part. I think I came by it the hard way. You know, that you have to reach a place, I think, in your life where you decide that you're going to move through it and move forward and be stronger. I love that idea of the Japanese that where they break the china and then they put the gold in between the broken pieces. And I think sometimes that's what happens to people that go through challenging and difficult times and try to find a way forward.
And how do you because there's this peace that's in you, there's this joy that's in you, there's actually there's like a contentment and it's hard to really explain, but it's like you're a rock. And how does that happen? Do you think it happens because of what you had to go through? And just like this thickness of skin that's just developed, like we said, that resilience it's just unshakable because you had to go through. It is because I have had a little like when you don't want to compare adversity, right? People go, this happened and this happened, but as you hear this, you're like, okay, this seems insurmountable, I think, to many people. And as we think about like the role you play and the people that look to you for guidance, and when we think about caring leadership or leadership with heart, and then that calm you present and the joy despite that adversity that you went through so many times. Yeah, just what do how do you think that still stays with you? Is there something that you do now, a centering thing that you do, just kind of keeps you in that space? Or I'm curious.
Getting ready, I think, in the day. I don't know that it's ever really scripted for me, but I try to show up for other people. Certainly that and I suppose learning, there has to be courage, I think, to show up for other people. And I think you have to be certain of yourself. And I try not to take myself too seriously. I try very hard to, I know in your book you talk a lot about allowing other people to shine. I worked for a wonderful doctor who used to say to me, I don't have a dog in the race. I just want to make sure that, having no agenda, I think, for what you do, and how you allow others to be raised up and to learn or grow or shine. I don't have a very punitive style of leadership. I think more of certainly an empathic style. I want to do for other people what was done for me. And in nursing, I think it's been a hard thing as well. I think nurses, we've gone through so much in our industry. We are post-pandemic and you know, when they came out with the nurses are superheroes, I would say, no, nurses are human. They're not
Mm,
superhero. And nurses aren't resilient. They're tired. And so
mhm.
I think being honest about who you are, what you represent, what you bring to the table, and letting other people be their authentic selves. We do that in hospice, right? When people knock on our door and they are in the throes of a serious illness or a terminal illness, we ask them, what matters most to you? What's important to you? Tell me more. How can I help you achieve a goal or a something that you value? You know, if you have a limited life expectancy, how can I help you? How can I serve you? And I suppose I am that way with our staff here, certainly our nursing staff. I say to them, there are far easier ways to make a living, and being a nurse isn't one of them. Being a hospice nurse isn't one of them, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
couldn't imagine.
It's so special though. It is such rewarding and special work to be able to stand with people, and I I think that we talk a lot about, wouldn't it be wonderful to, instead of making things less terrible for people, that we could make them more wonderful? And what would that shift look like for us? How do we make this experience for somebody more wonderful instead of just less terrible?
Oh gosh. That I think that right there, it kind of is I feel like it's the core of my thinking generally. I think that but particularly obviously in the leadership space, but really just in the human space,
Mhm.
if we ask ourselves, like I was just talking to my husband about this the other day, I said with our responses to people that if my goal with my interaction is to break down or break the bridge versus creating the bridge, or then we might respond this way. Is our goal then in our interaction to build the bridge, to create the connection, to create the care, to create the sense of importance? If that's like the most important thing for us, and if we focus on that, then we get that thing, and then all of our words and our behaviors like flow from that.
Mhm.
And so I love your focus on just that. It's like changing the entire way we talk about it. Less
Yeah,
horrible versus more wonderful is just, and the fact that the other thing, the sense that comes from you, which again, being your space is even more powerful, and thinking about how we can even extrapolate that into just our everyday work as this, I get to do it. It's a gift I have that I get to sit with and be with people in this place in their life. And that is just, it's a, like I said, everything you stand for really just turns everything else on its head, really.
it's true. I also think it's not necessarily creating a bridge, but it's being the bridge.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so I think that representation of what that is a, I don't have to work at that. I can simply, nurses we're human doings, right? And we have to learn to be a human being, and being that bridge between, when we teach communication skills in hospice work or palliative care, the skills of listening, the skills of silence, using words like, I wish. I wish I had better news. I wish those kidneys started working. Not saying, I'm sorry those kidneys didn't start
Hmm.
working and now you need dialysis. There's a skill that we teach in communication, and I know you tended to much of it in your book. The active listening part is the most important part of any interaction with patients and their families, right? The unit of care is not just the patient, it's whatever that patient defines their family to be. We are as responsible to them as we are to our patients. Cicely Saunders was the founder of the modern hospice movement, and she said, while it's important to take care of the people in the bed, it's equally or not even more important to take care of their family, because what goes on in the memories of those who live on is really the work. It is the work of tending to grief and bereavement. Um, and so it's being that human being, in the middle between the experience of illness and dying and how to get through it on the other side. Right.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think this is for anybody listening, whether you're in hospice or not, any healthcare or not, this concept of human doing and human being. And I think we need to own our roles in that much more clearly, just
Absolutely.
walking around each individually. And I think the reason why you and I were so connected or called like spiritually to each other just immediately was this concept of being the bridge. And I do want to ask you this, being the person that is the bridge, and you are small in stature, but boy,
When
you are
when people
massive
when people
in
look at me in person, they said, "Oh, I thought you were much taller."
you are like massively hard. Like everything else is just like massive about you, right? But thinking about being the bridge, that takes a lot, that the bridge withstands force. The bridge, sometimes has to be repaired because it gets into disrepair as people will continue to be on it. And
That's
so
right.
for people like us, like what is it that you do to fill you up that makes sure that the bridge stays intact for people to continue to kind of lean on you and to look to you to help with some of that guidance in that human being.
My sister and I looked after our mother, who I'm one of 5 children. And when my mother had advanced dementia and we were contemplating, nursing home or assisted living, I quit my job in New York and moved in with my sister, my older sister. I'm not allowed to call her my big sister, my older sister. And together as adults, we looked after our mother together. And I thought it would be a way to help me assuage some grief that I had been going through and loss. It was the hardest job I ever did. My mother was very demented and didn't really recognize us. And yet my sister and I, we laughed and laughed and laughed. And we had such an incredible time together as grown women, with families and jobs. And I think that was such more important to me than anything else as I was trying to work out my sense of grief and loss. And so I think the connectedness to that. Right now, I'm sitting outside a beautiful office and I'm looking out at I have these little birds outside. And I think it's just taking time to appreciate or reflect on where I am every day.
Mm.
We all have really tough days and tough seasons of our life. And I think allowing for that as well, surrounding yourself with people who get you, who understand. And that's been important too. If someone is in my life that is troubling to me, or that I don't necessarily, that doesn't make my life better or richer, or not that it's doing for me, but being around people who are encouragement. And I think that's important too. I don't do any social media, and so that's helpful, because I found that those comparisons and all of that, I don't want to be a part of that. So I had to make a literal correction in some of those things, and being tethered to things that I didn't need to be a part of. Right. So that was, I think, part of
Mm.
it. I think part of my own healing and my own way of living. I'm not
Mm.
too concerned with how other people are living their lives necessarily, right? Too much drama. So that's been
Mm.
helpful for me, I think, to not be in isolation, but I think not to get too involved in things that don't necessarily concern me.
That's beautiful. Yeah. Ooh, wow. Ooh, there's a lot there for sure, a lot embedded in that. I am curious to know with all of this, I mean, considering the things that we can influence and control, are there things in your journey, in your leadership, in your interactions, anything that you kind of regret? Like, I really wish I wouldn't have done that, or I really wish I wouldn't have said that, or I really wish I would have made a different decision. Do you have anything like that on the journey?
Sure. I when I was working at Mount Sinai, it's a unionized hospital, and I had never really worked in a large academic medical center before. And I found myself, this kind of round peg in a square hole. And so those skills that I'd honed and grown in hospice, and I entered into a much more hostile environment. And so I think being tenderhearted and not necessarily holding people as accountable as I could have or should have, to in their best interest to grow and learn and be shaped. So sometimes an empathic leader has a little more work to do in terms of holding people accountable and holding people to a standard. I now work in a very mission-driven, not-for-profit organization that our mission is important for sustainability and for, you know, the work that we do to keep our doors open. I have to have efficiencies here. And so those traits or character styles that I have had, it's a challenge for me. That's probably one of the biggest challenges that I've had in my career, is to not personalize too much what other people have responsibility in their own work and job for, and holding them to that account. And so, you know, even my children, they'd say, I don't want to debate, just spank me, you know, don't tell me what I should have done. Like, don't put me on a guilt trip. But that's sort of my style, you know, that I would rather talk about it and figure it out together, you know. I think that there is something really compelling about wanting to help people. Right, that's the sentimental emotion I think of certainly of my life. But do you remember the story of Margaret Mead? Was a sociologist or an anthropologist, and they asked her, I don't know if it's a true story or not, but they asked her how she knew she came upon a civilization, and she said, I know that I come upon a civilized society when I find a healed femur bone. And because the femur bone was the largest bone in the leg, and if you broke that bone, you couldn't hunt or run or feed yourself. You needed someone to look after you. And so when she found a femur bone that had been healed, she knew that someone had to care for that person. And that was how she defined civilization, right? A society that took care of someone else, wasn't self-serving or self-indulgent, or, you know, killing their own, you know, animal to eat and not giving that to someone else. Like, I love that notion, whether it's a true story or not, because I think that's true. As we serve and take care of other people in order for not only our own survival, but survival within a society, that's compelling to me when I consider that, right? Helping someone else to be their best, or to allowing others to shine, taking the focus sort of off yourself. I loved that you had a guest on one of your podcasts, and he said, I can't remember his name, but he said, humility is the way you see yourself, humanity is the way you see others, and honesty is the way you connect the two of those. I loved that. I loved that statement that he made, because I do think being honest and courageous about your own experiences, not to wear it like a banner over your head, but to let those things inform you and be a better leader. I have right now some young nursing leaders who are learning and growing and learning how to deal with staff and staffing issues and call-offs and sick calls and managing our teams. And, you know, I find them so like sponges, right? They just want to do it well. I'm not a micromanager. And so allowing someone to bloom and make mistakes and learn from them and grow and be is really the style. They're all my succession plan in my future of leadership here. But I think those things are important, that we invest in our folks and invest in a way that allows them to be their best selves, whatever that looks like, right? Unique and show up with your best intended kindness and empathy.
Mm. So, wrapping up, one of the things I want to ask, just like to leave everybody with, would be a couple strategies or pearls of wisdom you might leave the people with that are listening related to um, re kind of growing in resilience, or the thing
Yeah.
that, maybe things to focus on to just get through a tough circumstance. It could be, like you said, founded in grief. It could be in loneliness. It could be a recent diagnosis. It could be some of the things you've talked about. And everybody goes through it. And those who are listening either have, will, are. And so, what might be just a couple of kind of weapons in the arsenal, tools in the toolkit that you might recommend for them?
So I say we have to show up and we have to pay attention. We have to speak from the heart. And I think the last one is really the most important, that don't be attached to the outcome too much, right? So you show up, you pay attention, you speak from your heart with honesty and kindness and charity, and then try not to be too attached to the outcome. It's been true for me in my role in nursing and in leadership. There was a time perhaps that I was too attached to the outcomes, and I was invested in, and I think over the years people have their own walk to walk, and allowing that to be, and being sure that you come up alongside of them and you help and walk with them, and do what you can to listen, to help, to serve, to I guess give a sense of hope to them too, right? There, in caring for the dying, we can't change that for them, but we can try to make it more wonderful instead of less terrible.
Maureen. I knew I had you on here for a reason. Again, thinking about this for those who are listening, wrapping this up in one neat bow for me is that to get through those tough circumstances, it's much easier to be others focused, to focus outward instead of inward, instead of it being just about me and what I'm feeling. How can I take the thing I'm feeling and transfer it in a more positive way to those who need me in the moment? And whether that's somebody that you're leading that's, from a title perspective, or just another human who's across from you, we need to stop doing the human doing and being human beings, and then show up with just like extreme compassion, presence, humility, and just giving. And I think that's the bow, that's the neat bow that you provide for us. And it is just, it's been a huge pleasure. I could go on and on. I'm going to be truthful about this with you. Just have such a deep respect for you and the human that you are, and just keep being the wonderful person you are.
Thank you, Heather. You as well. You're a delight and a reward to all of us, and I so appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Thanks for being on the Leadership at Heart podcast, and everybody, thank you for being here. Be well.